grocery store and they turned it into,
right.
I mean, so they just got a warehouse, so it's like a bigger version of what we have.
Yeah.
Big metal building.
Which, I mean, Generations, it does. I think the overhead's a lot lower than having a traditional church.
Yeah.
The church that I grew up in, Hebrew Lutheran church, the building's beautiful. Like,
Yeah.
Sanctuary's gorgeous. It's got one of those A-frame roofs and everything. It's just, but like, there's just so much maintenance that has to be done on that. And with like a grocery store, they're built to be low maintenance.
And like, not that, like, I don't, who knows what the future of Generation holds, but like, I mean, if we ever wanted to sell that building, like, we could probably sell it to a business.
Yeah, I think so.
Hebrew and Lutheran, they're not going to be able to sell it to a business.
No, they're not.
So,
they're not.
Like, they have to hope that another church is going to be about that size to move up there.
Yeah.
So,
and there won't be one.
No.
So,
unfortunately, it's not a very good, like, financial decision. But,
no.
I've always wanted to buy one as a house, though.
That would be fun.
Yeah.
And that's that's a pretty big trend now that people are doing. Like, there are a lot of people that are buying churches.
So there's like a stone church that they sold in Ludlow for $55,000.
That's crazy.
And I'm like, I mean, I just wish I would have bought it. But anyway.
We I forget what show. I don't know. Like, it was there was a TV show that they put out a long time ago. It was like 10 years old, but we watched some episodes of it during COVID. And it was like, it was called like Most Unique Houses in America or crazy. I don't know. But there were on that show a lot of people that had purchased churches and turned them into homes. Yeah. Now, some of them were not very functional, like, because some of the churches were like cylindrical or whatever. And so all the rooms were messed up. But some of them, like, they had where the choir loft was, they would have their master bedroom.
That's cool.
So it looked really, now I think it would be, I think it'd be weird. They're just, I don't know, it'd be weird, drinking on a sanctuary stage and stuff like that.
Maybe like you leave that for like the fellowship hall or whatever, but you can have like a room dedicated to like, this is where we drink. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like,
it'd be like a Catholic church.
Yeah, right. Basically, But I mean, as long as you're not doing idol worship, you know what I'm saying?
Right,
I think you're okay.
Yeah, you don't want to go in and draw some pentagrams on the floor and do any of that stuff.
Probably not.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. All right. Well, man, you ready to go?
Sure. Yeah.
All right. Perfect. Well, I'm going to have to edit all the beginning of the video out here.
We're rolling.
Yeah. Well, I turned it on. I'll get in there and edit everything, or I won't, and then you'll just have to listen to us talk at the beginning. But anyways, welcome to another episode of the Protestant Libertarian Podcast. I have my good friend Dr. Matthew Barber back on the show today. So, Dr. Matthew Barber, how you doing today?
Pretty good. Thanks for having me.
Good. Yeah. Matt is your PhD's in business administration.
Organizational leadership.
Organizational leadership.
Yeah.
Okay. And you do that professionally, but you also have a side job as a nutrition coach.
That's correct.
And we're going to be talking about that today. My audience knows that I try every couple months to release an episode where I talk about health, because health, exercise, physical activity, this is very, very important to me. And I think that in terms of just, we're Christians and we believe that God gave us this body and that we should take care of it. And then also, if we want to get outside of the medical industrial complex, and you have to take ownership of your health. And I think that what you are doing is enabling people to take responsibility and take control of their health. And so I'm really excited to talk to you about all that today. For the people that are listening to this on a podcast, stream where they're not looking at the video on YouTube, then nothing's going to be, out of the ordinary for them. But for the people that are watching on YouTube, I have a very, very terrible video set up here. It's the first time I've ever done an in-person interview where I've recorded it. So I basically have a nightstand on top of a nightstand, and my laptop's on top of that. So here's our great video setup.
It works.
Yeah, it does. But LCI wants us to have some videos for all of our podcasts. So, but basically, the long story short here, before we get into the conversation, is donate a lot to LCI. And if you want to donate to me personally so I can get a better studio, then email me at theprotestantlibertarian@gmail.com, and I will give you my Venmo account, and you can send me as much money as you want. So, there we go. I'm getting that out of the way before we start. But Matt, before we get into talking about nutrition and health and exercise and all of that, just talk to us about yourself, your background, your work, and all of that stuff.
Yeah, sure. So I've been on the show, I think 2 or 3 times before. So for my full-time job, I'm a global learning leader for GE Healthcare. So what that means is I basically manage learning and development for the supply chain of a large medical manufacturing organization. And then I also teach some college courses on the side because my background is in academia. So before getting into learning and development, I was a full-time professor and administrator. And then recently, within the last 2 years, I would say, I've also kind of got into nutrition coaching, just more of a personal passion.
And you, even before you got your doctorate, you had worked in a hospital before. So
Yes.
this is like, so you're, I mean, throughout your career trajectory, you've always been kind of in and out of the healthcare world. So in a lot of ways, I think you have a perspective on that that most people don't, because you've been in that world in different places. You know, it's
Right. Yeah. So I've been associated with healthcare for most of my career. So I worked within a hospital in various roles, some administrative roles, some clinical roles. Although it was so the highest I got from a clinical standpoint was like a nurse assistant, which is not very,
yeah,
not very
right.
noteworthy. But so I went pretty quickly into healthcare administration. And then even when I was in academia, so like my master's is in health services administration. So a lot of my focus has been on the medical industry. More from a administrative. I've been a part of it basically. I've been kind of a reviewer.
Yeah. Now, nutrition is a very interesting topic.
Hmm.
And this is one of those things that I think, and I know we're going to talk about this in a couple of minutes, but there's a lot of ignorance in the American population about what good nutrition is.
Yeah.
And I know that for me, I think I've talked about this on the show a little bit before, but my mom got cancer, breast cancer, when I was
Hmm.
in high school. And she survived, and she's still alive today and in good health and everything like that. So that was great. But is my senior year, and that was a real wake up call to me that I needed to start taking better care of my body. But at that time, I thought that like having good nutrition was like having a peanut butter sandwich and eating, like, peppers for lunch. And that was kind of like my first foray into nutrition. And over time, I realized that like what I had thought was good nutrition, because what people had told me was good nutrition, actually wasn't. And
Yeah.
so it's really been over the last 6 or 7 years where I've really started to think about, all right, so what is it like? How can I optimize my health, and how do the things that I put in my body impact my overall health? So you're into nutrition coaching.
Hmm.
So what first got you interested in nutrition as a means of becoming healthy? And then what got you interested in not just doing that for yourself, but helping other people by coaching them?
So I would say that fitness has been a hobby of mine for most of my life. So I think that the my passion was originally around fitness, and then my as we get older, so like I was into
Right.
grappling, and so as I was doing like Brazilian jiu jitsu, and I was kind of getting to be around 40. I was noticing that my ability to keep up with like the younger athletes was like kind of diminishing.
Right.
And so really I wanted to kind of optimize like my ability to really just kind of be active. And so that's really what led me into nutrition, so from a personal standpoint. And so I started kind of really kind of researching just basic nutrition, things I could do. That led me to get certified as a nutrition coach. Whenever I got certified as a nutrition coach, it really kind of like lit a little bit of I guess, kind of a fire. Just because a lot, I had like a base level knowledge of nutrition, but really like that really took me much deeper, and it kind of illuminated all that's there. And then it really, so personally, I just got really excited about from a personal standpoint, meaning that, the ability to kind of manipulate what you're able to do from a personal, standpoint physically, I think was very exciting.
Yeah.
But then also, as I was, you kind of look around at your friends and your family who are also aging.
Right.
You kind of see uh, them diminishing, for lack of a better word, because of lack of nutrition. I kind of was noticing nutrition is one of those things where, it can be somewhat frustrating at times, because it's one of those things that people eat all the time.
Right.
And so I think that somehow people have this assumption that they know about nutrition, but there's a lot of myths out there. There's a lot of ignorance when it comes to nutrition. And so what I found is that a lot of people really just don't have a basic understanding of just nutrition. And so it's kind of like it's a lot of that. And I felt like it was an area where it's one of the first things that I found to where I really felt almost like a draw to just help people be
Yeah.
the best version of themselves. So there's it's a long story, so I won't try to like tell the whole thing. But there's a passage in the Bible that's like in the book of Joshua. So the whole story is essentially like the Israelites are wandering around the wilderness, and they send the 12 spies into the promised land to spy out the promised land. long story short, they come back. 10 of the spies are like, this isn't for
Right.
us. Like the people are too strong. Two of the spies, which would be Joshua and Caleb, say like, no, like God's with us. We can take the land. So anyway, fast forward 40 years, because they're wandering around the desert
Right.
for 40 years. They're getting ready to take the promised land. And like, so Joshua is talking to Caleb. And so Joshua's like, basically, what part of the land do you want? And Caleb's response is, he's like, I feel as young as I did when I was 40. I'm 80 years old. Obviously, I'm paraphrasing. Like, give me the hill country, like, give me the land that's most difficult to take. And so that passage in itself is like, just like, was really exciting for me. Like, it's like, we as people, like, have the ability to age, and like not only age, but age like and still be physical, to still do things.
Yeah.
And so if you look around society, and you see people who are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, I mean, like, not a lot of them are taking any hills.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So I really think that the more that people would both know about nutrition and also take it seriously, the more life people are going to be able to live.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what excites me about nutrition.
Yeah, and I agree with you. And this has been one of the things that over the last several years has really struck out to me, is that as I've seen my nutrition and exercise like routines completely transform my life and
Yeah.
make me a much healthier person. Like, I don't get sick hardly ever.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel good all the time. And I can still, obviously I'm not 25 anymore. So I'm
Right.
not going to ever be able to perform like I was at 25, but I'm doing really well,
Yeah.
for being, 11 years older than that right now. And in a lot of ways, I feel like I'm in better shape. And you just like, you want to share that with people. And in my experience, and especially like so many people that I know personally, they complain about having like chronic health issues, or I can't walk up the stairs without getting out of breath, or I'm sick all the time, or my kids are sick all the time. And so there are all these health related issues that people deal with, and you want to help set them free in a
Yeah.
sense, because
Right.
like there actually are ways that we can solve these problems. But I guess there are kind of two questions that I want to talk with you about here. We've already discussed maybe the ignorance of the American population, and I want to talk about the reasons why so many Americans are in the dark about
Yeah.
nutrition. But before we do that, I want to talk just about, like, in general, why is it that so many Americans are unhealthy? What are like the dietary and exercise reasons for that? And it is almost, this is one of the things that's so shocking to me, is that we do live in like the wealthiest
Yeah.
civilization in human history, right? So
Right.
like, in one sense, the potential for having a high standard of living has never been greater at any other point in history than it is right now. So if you're living in America in the 21st century, even with all of our problems as a society, it doesn't get much better than this for the human species. And if you want to take control of your life, you can, and
Correct.
make your life a lot better. But we also live in one of the least healthy, most chronically ill, most overweight civilizations in human history. So
Yeah.
we have those two things. So why is it that when we live in a country, a civilization with so much potential for people to take control of their health, why is it that we're so unhealthy in general?
So I think there's a lot of answers to that question. So the where I'll probably start is that just in general, it's not convenient to be healthy. So like if you're eating
Yeah.
away from your home, so if you're eating at a fast food restaurant, or even really at a sit down restaurant for that matter, so if you're getting food away from your home, it's almost impossible to get a meal that is at the right caloric balance. And then we're going to get, I'm assuming we're probably going to talk about macros here
Yeah.
in a little bit. So like, as far as from a caloric standpoint and a macronutrient standpoint, it's almost impossible to eat outside of your house in America and get like a well balanced meal. So the palate, so people's preference for food, it's a natural thing that where people generally will crave things that are savory or sweet. And so what that generally means is that you're either mixing carbs and fats, or you're mixing, sugar with something. And so that's what people prefer. And so that's what businesses sell. And then also it's more of an economic reason, where, so there's a saying within just nutrition that like carbs are cheap and protein's expensive.
Yeah.
And so if you look at any meal that you get outside the home, you're going to have a much larger portion of carbs and fat than you are protein. And so basically what that means is that the more that you eat outside the house, the less likely you are that you're eating a well balanced meal. So that's reason number one. I think number two is that I think that the way that we teach nutrition is a little skewed, or it's off. And so I don't really blame the schools too much for this, because ultimately you can teach a child or even someone in high school about proper nutrition, but ultimately it's the people that run the home that ultimately dictate
Right.
like what you eat. So for example, I could learn about calories and macros in high school, but when I go home, I'm not going to tell my mom like this mac and cheese has too many carbs
Right.
and fat. So ultimately it's like, so eating is like kind of a family cultural thing.
Yeah.
This is something it's kind of interesting. Is like if you look at family photos, generally all the people in the family photo have the same build,
Yeah.
and that's because eating habits are passed down from family to family. So generally, as you kind of see families go through time, they generally will take on the same body shape because they have the same eating habits.
Right.
So unless somebody kind of breaks that eating tradition, then like they're kind of destined to some extent to take on the same body shape of their parents, which it could is not always bad, but sometimes obviously that's like basically like it's a family tradition of like obesity or unhealthiness. So I think that eating habits and eating tradition is another thing. And then I think that there's like even though we are like a wealthy country, there's like there's kind of I kind of somewhat view this as I don't want to. I typically don't blame organizations for the way they market, but I think that organizations do understand that people are somewhat ignorant about nutrition, so they prey on
Right. Yeah.
citizens as far as how they market.
Right.
And so, because of there's a lack of awareness around nutrition facts, organizations and businesses are able to market in a way that somewhat basically they just confuse the population. So people like will eat something and they'll think it's healthy, but it's just only healthy because the marketer says it's
Right.
healthy. And then we also outsource our health, meaning that like we basically place the ownership of our health on somebody else. So I think that this has probably been something that's done from the marketing companies, from the pharmaceutical organizations, where they've kind of convinced Americans that if you have an issue that can be solved through medication. And so what that has done is it's kind of given Americans a framework where they outsource their health to the medical community,
Yeah.
which is a problem.
Right. Well, I mean, it's the pharmacological paradigm of health. That's
Yeah.
really what it is. And so many Americans have imbibed in that. And I do think that, I mean, the pharmaceutical industry is obviously one of the most powerful lobbies in the entire country,
Mhm.
along with agriculture and then like defense, right? So you have the agricultural industry and the pharmaceutical industry spend billions and billions of dollars a year ensuring that legislation is crafted in their favor, but Americans keep on getting less and less healthy. So
Mhm.
you can just looking at it from an empirical standpoint, we know that it's not working. And to your point, because I do want to talk about like what leads to American ignorance. I do think some of it's political pressure. I do think some of it's marketing. I do think some of it's the public school system. I will say just like from like I'm a public school teacher, so I am in a building with 900 kids every single day, and we have more and more kids being diagnosed with ADHD and depression all the time. But what I see coming from the vantage point of someone who knows a little bit about nutrition and exercise are students that live sedentary lifestyles
Mhm.
from the moment they wake up in the morning to the moment they go to bed. They're
Yeah.
constantly exposed to screen time and blue light all day long. They don't get any physical activity. They don't drink water. A lot of their parents will give them energy drinks for lunch. The food that they serve in the cafeteria, no matter what the propaganda is, it's not good food. Like
Yeah.
it's again, it's the carb, fat heavy diet. They're not
Mhm.
getting good, clean food from the cafeteria. And then they wonder why these kids have ADHD.
Yeah.
And so my thought's always been like, well, maybe instead of prescribing a student with a pill, the long-term effects of which we know almost nothing about because we can't have any longitudinal studies because these pills haven't been around for that. Like we have no idea what ADHD medicine does to somebody 40 years after taking it,
Right.
right? And maybe instead of prescribing them a pill and diagnosing them with some sort of clinical condition, we should try to modify their diet and exercise and lifestyle choices and see if that makes a difference. But it's whenever I bring that up,
Mhm.
you're fighting an uphill battle because
Yeah.
you're like, no, ADHD
Right.
is like ADHD is it's just people have it and it's real, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, maybe it is, but there's no way that 50% of our student population happens to have ADHD at the same time that they do nothing but play video games and eat junk food, right? Like there has to be some sort of correlation between those two things, and so again, I think that's just indicative to me of the kind of ignorance that many Americans have, and I do think a part of it is that we live in a culture where we don't want to take personal responsibility
That's
for our
right.
health. We would
Yeah.
rather say I have a condition condition
Mhm.
that a doctor diagnosed me with. I'm a victim. Therefore, give me a pill that will help me with this condition, but then it just makes
Right.
us more sick. So, I say all that to kind of set up this next question. And again, I know there are a lot of different angles you will want to approach this from, but why is it that we're so ignorant about this stuff? Like, it seems to me like it's obvious, like we can obviously deduce the sources of the problems that we're facing. Most Americans can't. So
Mhm.
why are we so ignorant?
So I don't think I think it's a lot of things. So I think some of it is intentional, and I think some of it is just with the nation being wealthy, we have the ability to like buy the things that we want.
Right.
So like maybe like I don't want to do the work, I guess, to learn about nutrition. Like I'll just like eat what's convenient, and then if I have like high cholesterol, I'll just go get a pill that like automatically helps lower my cholesterol.
Right.
So I think it's a convenience thing. I do think that I don't want to lump all the medical community into like one big
Mhm.
bucket, but what I will say is that one issue is that whenever you go to the doctor, generally the diagnosis that you receive, they give you a treatment based on that diagnosis,
Right.
and it's usually in a pharmaceutical form.
Right.
Whenever I think that I guess my call to physicians would also to be to look over the overall health of the patient, and what that means is it also like so if you go into the doctor's office and you have a condition, don't just treat the condition, but also talk about maybe what the root cause of that condition
Right.
is. So the example that I'll use is that let's say somebody goes into say they're aging, and they're having knee issues, and so like what they'll do is like they do all these tests to figure out what the knee issue is, but what they won't do is have a conversation about how like your body weight plays a huge point. So for every step you take, every pound that you weigh puts 3 pounds of pressure on your knee joint.
Right.
And so if you're having knee issues, one of the a great thing that you could do is just lose weight. But generally, not all, because I know some physicians like will have they'll have I guess they'll be courageous enough to say this, is they'll say that while we are going to do these other things, something else you could do is you could improve your nutritional intake,
Yeah.
meaning lower your body fat content, and this is also going to help your knee. So I guess what I would say is that we live in a society to where because we are wealthy, I think that we become very accustomed to just buying the fix that we have,
Yeah.
and some things like nutrition, you can't. It has to be something that you do intentionally, and you kind of to some extent have to be curious about. You have to be the owner of your own health, essentially. I don't know. I think that's probably the best I can do with that.
Yeah, no, no, I think you're completely right, and it's the idea that we don't want to take responsibility for that because we'd rather like outsource it to somebody else, you
Yeah.
know. But I know, like to your point, and I had a very powerful personal experience with this, where this was like I guess in my late 20s, I just like I all of a sudden developed like crazy heartburn, like
Mhm.
everything that I ate would give me heartburn, and my stomach was always upset, and I remember going to the doctor, and my doctor was like, "Well, we have this pill that will take care of this, but you're going to have to be on it for the rest of your life, but it will solve your heartburn." And then
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know if I want to be on medicine the rest of my life. And as I was looking up the side effects of this medicine, there was like, it can cause like, heart damage and all
Mhm.
kinds of like liver damage and all kinds of
Well, at least you
other.
won't have heartburn.
Right. Yeah. I wouldn't have heartburn. Right. Yeah. But I might have a heart attack.
Yeah. Right.
And so I was like, there has to be an alternative to this. And at this time I was running a lot. That was my main form of exercise.
Mhm.
And so I was just always like, well, I got to eat a bunch of carbs because that's what, if you're a runner, you just eat carbs because that was the conventional wisdom that I had heard.
Yeah.
And I wound up going and seeing a functional nutritionist. And he was essentially like, well, you're probably consuming way too many carbohydrates and you might have had like some sort of bacterial infection. And so what he did was he had me go gluten-free for a little while. And then he put me on some supplements that would kind of help balance the pH levels in my stomach. And after about a month, I was done. I haven't had heartburn in 6 years because of that. And I didn't need any medication. It was just modifying my diet,
Yeah.
and fixing the pH levels in my stomach, all natural, without having to spend thousands of dollars. And there were no side effects other than I feel better
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. But it just goes to show you that that was the level of ignorance that I was at. Even as someone that was trying to take care of myself, the prevailing theory was that if you're a runner, you need more carbohydrates. So you should just carb up, carb out.
Mhm.
If you're running 5 days a week, you got carb. And that didn't work for me, right?
Mhm.
And so, but for me, when I stepped outside of that system and took personal responsibility for my health and started trying to get to the root causes of what was making me sick, I was able to find solutions to those problems that actually made my life a whole lot better. So you've already referenced personal responsibility, and I think the way that as we were talking about what we were going to discuss during the show, you framed it as taking ownership of
Yeah.
your own health. Like,
Right.
you own your body. It's fundamental to both Christian theology and libertarianism. Like, we own ourselves. And so why is that so important, and how would you encourage Americans to the people listening to the show to develop the mentality of, I want to take ownership over my health?
So I would say that, obviously this isn't by and large, but I would say that what I see a lot is that people, they outsource their health to the health professionals, meaning the physicians. And I think that the reason that that's an issue is that there's a Greek philosophy, or a Greek saying that, because I'm on a podcast, I can't remember the exact
Of
saying, but
course, yeah.
essentially it's like, so like, it's basically like, he who's not his own physician is a fool.
Yeah.
And I think that the purpose behind that saying is not so much that we should all go get medical degrees. It's just that we should all be taking ownership over our own health. And that, in the way that I view that, is that ultimately what you should be doing is you should be trying to live in a way to where you're trying to optimize your own health, and to where you're not going to have to go to the doctor. You're not going to,
Right.
you're lowering your risk. So there's some things that we can't control, right? So we can't control getting all sorts of cancers. Or, we can't control, for example, breaking our leg when we fall down or whatever. But we can improve our odds, meaning that we can lower our risk of cancer. We can lower our risk of heart disease. We can improve our mobility by just staying active.
Mhm.
So there are things that we can do. The way that we eat can ultimately dictate how often we become ill.
Yeah.
So there are things that we can do as individuals that can improve our chances of avoiding illness and injury. And so what happens is, whenever you don't really pay attention to your health over a very long period of time, it doesn't matter if it's going to be 10 years, 20 years, eventually you're going to run into chronic disease, to where you're going to have to involve yourself with the medical industry. The medical industry does a whole lot of great things, but the problem with I would say, my argument against the medical industry is that it's an industry that is designed to make money.
Right. Yeah.
And so while they do fantastic things, if you go to the doctor, chances are they are going to give you some sort of thing that's going to help your immediate issue. It kind of becomes a revolving door, to where you go to the doctor, they give you a medication or a treatment that's going to fix that issue. But because they didn't fix the root cause, which is that you're not taking ownership of your health, you're now going to be in this cycle to where you're now reliant on the medical industry to just keep you healthy.
Yeah.
And so I think that for to live an optimized life, to be able to properly, care for your loved ones, to be around, to be like the best version of yourself. It's just a logical decision to take ownership of your health and be like the best version of yourself that you can be within reason.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. Now I want to transition to start talking about some method here, like how do, once people have accepted that the prevailing medical paradigm is not working in the United States,
Mhm.
and that the way that Americans think about health and nutrition is not actually healthy, and when people begin to want to take ownership of their life, like, what are the next steps? Now, obviously, a lot of it depends on what your goals are. Like, for you and me, we've both been, I mean, you even longer than me, but we've both been focused on nutrition for a very long time, and we both work out on a regular basis. So we're at the point in our health journey where it's about optimization. Like, how can we maximize our workouts? How can we maximize our nutrition to reach our health goals, right? And our health goals aren't necessarily the exact same thing. Like, I might have a different goal for myself and my body than you have for yours, but we're both at that point of optimization. But there are a lot of people that are maybe like, they're very overweight, or they're very out of shape, and they're trying to start from square one. And the methods that we would use to optimize our health aren't necessarily the same that they need to get the ball rolling.
Right.
So what are some of the methods that people should be focusing on? And for people that want to get better, or even start the journey, how would they do that? Like how do we think about what's best from a nutrition and exercise standpoint, given our different situations? How do we do that?
So I guess, to start answering this question, I kind of have to set some context as far as where I'm coming from. So just the term healthy is like very relative.
Yeah.
So like, I mean, so like,
Right.
and this is where I kind of have to like throw out all those disclaimers. So obviously I'm not a physician. And so I would very much pigeon myself to my primary focus whenever I'm in coaching nutrition is body composition. And so body composition is the how your body is composed, meaning like your muscle to fat ratio.
Yeah.
So bodies are made up of muscle, fat, bone, and I'm leaving one out, water.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I guess what I try to promote as a nutrition coach is I'm trying to optimize body composition, meaning that you want to increase the amount of muscle you have, and you want to have a decrease the amount of body fat you have. So in general, a lot of the major ailments that especially Americans have with their health are associated with their amount of body fat, or if you want to go the opposite direction, it's for lack of muscle mass. And so this kind of goes into so one of the things that we have in America, because we're always looking for quick fixes, is we have a lot of fad diets.
Yeah.
Fad diets often lead to yo-yo dieting. And so what happens is that, and this is going to become a little bit of a tangent, so I focus in on body composition. And so what I would say that someone can do to start looking at their own health is to start managing their current level of what their current body composition is, meaning they need to make sure that they're increasing the amount of muscle they have and decreasing the amount of fat.
Yeah.
If you do yo-yo dieting, or that, so this is kind of like what I've observed a lot of Americans will do, is that they'll get up to a weight and they associate health with their weight.
Right.
So let's say that a person, and for whatever reason, people use what they weighed in high school as a reference point, which is ridiculous. But let's say that somebody weighed 200 pounds, just throwing out random numbers.
Right.
So they weighed 200 pounds in high school. And so now, let's say that they, through their 20s, they're up to maybe 240. And so they realize, because the scale says 240, and also what they see in the mirror is obviously they're seeing more fat than what they did when they were in high school. They think, okay, I need to lose weight. And so the concept that they place around health is with weight. And so what they'll do is they'll go on a diet. They generally, if it's one of the fad diets, what they'll do is they'll just cut overall caloric intake. So the way that just nutrition works is that it's almost kind of like a car.
Yeah.
So if we view ourselves as cars, a car has gas. If you fill the tank up perfectly to full, and then you drive the amount of miles it takes to empty that gas tank, then you have a perfect match between your gas and your car. So that's the same with calories.
Yeah.
So let's say that I burn, the standard is 2,000 calories a day. If I take in 2,000 calories in a day, then my weight will not change. It'll stay the same.
Yeah.
So if I take in slightly less calories, then that means you're going to have a little bit of weight decrease. If you take in a little bit more calories, that means you're going to have a weight increase. The problem with just focusing on calories, which is what a fad diet generally does, is that it focuses only on decreasing calories. And so what will happen is that person who's at 240 will lose 20 pounds. So we'll just say, for sake of argument, the guy's name is Tom. So Tom is at
any Tom's listening to the show.
there is no Tom that I know that I'm referencing. But so Tom went from 200 to 240. So he, went on a fad diet. So now he's 220. Tom's feeling pretty good. The problem with his approach on that is that because he didn't understand macronutrients, or increase knowledge about nutrition, is that the 20 pounds that Tom lost, 10 of those pounds were probably muscle, and then 10 of those pounds were probably fat.
Right.
So generally, because he didn't really understand nutrition, he just kind of followed a fad diet. Over the next, we'll say 5 to 10 years, Tom goes back up to 240, just because this is the way things happen.
Right.
And then so Tom's like, well, I need to go on that diet again. So he loses the 20 pounds again, and he loses 10 pounds of fat and 10 pounds of muscle. So what's happening is that each time that Tom goes back up and Tom goes back down, he's burning the fat, but he's also burning muscle. And so if he doesn't have a resistance training routine or some kind of exercise routine over the period of Tom's life, this cycle continues. This is what yo-yo dieting is. And as Tom continues to go on, he's experiencing something called sarcopenia, which is age-related muscle loss. And so one of the things that I think that we're going to see in this country, which I think I think it's going to be very prevalent, especially with things like GLP-1 drugs, which they aid with weight loss, which is fantastic.
So is this Ozempic, that kind of?
Correct. Yeah. Okay. So those are all the Ozempic, and all the drugs like Ozempic are called GLP-1s. And so what they do is it's a natural appetite depressant and also allows your body to digest food more efficiently, which is fantastic. But the problem is it doesn't fix the issue. If you don't have resistance training, if you're not getting enough protein, which we can talk about here in a second, you're not only losing fat, you're also losing muscle. So what's happening is that as you kind of go through this cycle of gaining weight and losing weight, as you lose this muscle, when you get older, you really don't have a lot of muscle mass, and you can see this a lot if you just look around.
Right.
Usually, you can see it starting around like age 45. You start to notice it. Both men and women have very decreased amounts of muscle mass. And so we kind of have come into this point in society, and this is, I think, is like the optimal sign that like the society is like very rich, is that like people is like, you basically have these older people who are overweight, and ultimately what kills them is that they fall, and that their body doesn't have the muscle to either catch themselves and keep them up, or protect themselves from the impact.
Right.
So they end up breaking a hip, breaking an ankle, breaking a whatever. And now they're mobile, they give in more heavy, and essentially that's what kills them. So to be honest, I don't know where I'm going with this, but
Yeah, no. You
Yeah.
were just talking about the methods that people can employ to get in better shape,
Yeah,
right?
so-
and
so-
thinking about this critically.
Yeah. So ultimately, what individuals need to do is they need to have a baseline understanding of fitness and nutrition.
Yeah.
They need to have I guess, guardrails in place within their own life. They don't have to be like, everyone doesn't have to be an ultra marathoner,
Right.
but they just need to understand the basics of nutrition so that they can understand. So there's Andrew Huberman is another
Mm-hmm.
podcaster.
Yeah.
He has a really great saying, which is do what you want, but know what you're doing. And so I subscribe to that 100%.
Yeah.
Meaning that, like, I'm not telling someone they can never have chocolate cake again. What I am saying, though, is that you should understand the components of that chocolate cake and what the consequences of that chocolate cake are. If you know what those are, and then you still choose to eat it, then
Right.
everyone
It's a
has
personal choice.
Yeah, you're making the choice. Where we're at right now as a society is people are just eating the cake,
Yeah.
and all they know is it tastes good,
Yeah.
and they don't understand kind of exactly what the ramifications of that is.
Right. And then it's like, oh, I have a genetic health condition, which is why I'm unhealthy.
Correct, yeah,
Not the
no.
fact that I love to eat chocolate cake all the time.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I had a friend, and he's and he listens to shows sometimes, so he might, I'm not going to name any names, but he knows who he is. But he's gotten much healthier over the last couple of years. But I remember, like, there was a time when he was pretty overweight. But he would just say, like, I know I'm out of shape and I know it's my fault, but I just don't care. And I was like, I can respect that.
Yeah, right.
because he's not blaming anyone
That
else.
is
He's
an
like,
approach, right.
I love cheesecake, and I love beer, and I'm not going to stop, And I'm like, okay, all right, well, that's good. It's
Yeah.
you at least, So I have a
Find what you
built-in,
love and let it kill you.
right? Yeah, that's
Basically.
right. I have a respect for those people. I
Yeah.
don't have respect for people that do that and they're like, I have a genetic condition, I can't do anything to solve it. Like that's a problem.
It's different, right?
Yeah, it is. So I do want to talk about, like, kind of the and again, optimal is a relative term because I think everyone has different needs. I do think. Well, let me ask you this, because this is something I've been thinking about a lot more over the last couple of years. How much of a role does genetics play in both our body composition, and then also, I know that there's been some research on this, and you would know a lot more about it than I do. But there have been some nutritionists and exercise scientists that have said that depending on your genetic profile, like some people might be, you need to have both cardio and resistance training, right? But there might be some people who are just genetically more geared towards resistance training and will get more out of that, and then there's some people that are more genetically geared towards cardio and would get more out of, like, going for a jog or a run or a walk than they would out of resistance. Now, again, you need both. No one's denying that. But is there kind of a genetic component to all of this that maybe we should try to at least be aware of when we're taking these factors in consideration?
So I would say yes. I would say, though, that on the whole, I guess in the big picture, I don't think that you need to worry too much about genetics. I think that being active is what's important. I think that there's a certain level of like resistance training that you would need, just because like cardio is great for the heart, it's for the lungs, for the circulatory system.
Right.
But like, I think there's like to go back to the sarcopenia argument. I mean, there's a lot of ultra marathon runners who don't have a lot of muscle mass.
Right.
It's very true that people digest foods differently. So caffeine is a great example. So you've probably met individuals who they're like, oh, well, I can drink a cup of coffee at 10 p.m. I'll go right to sleep.
Yeah.
And then there's other people like myself. If I would drink a cup of coffee at 10 p.m., I'm not going to bed that night.
Right. Yeah, if I drink a cup of coffee at 11 o'clock in the morning, I might not go to bed. I have to do it. Like, we're recording very early in the morning. I have to do it like I have a hard cutoff at 11. No caffeine after that.
So people do digest food differently. There are different like biomarkers that people are predisposed to different things. As far as like distance or cardio focused athletes, and then also like strength focused athletes, People do have like different, so muscle, there's 4 different types of muscle fibers. This is also kind of just for just again, another disclaimer. So my focus is my coaching, my certifications on nutrition. It's not on personal training,
Right.
which means that like I understand that there's 4 different types of muscle fibers. They draw energy in different ways, but those muscle fibers are basically designed to do different things.
Right.
So like some muscle fibers are designed for strength training, so that means like short bursts of maximal effort over a short period of time. Some muscle fibers are geared towards long distance running, meaning that you're going to be doing a repetitive motion. Like so,
Right.
think of your calves.
Right.
If you're running 20 miles,
Right.
that calf is going to be different than if you're doing a calf press of like
Right.
200 pounds.
Right.
But what I would say though is that just because someone's like genetically disposed to one way, that doesn't mean that someone can't do that. And actually, that's one of the things that I'm somewhat fascinated in is if you see someone who is like an ultra marathon runner and then they switch to be a power lifter,
Right.
or vice versa. It seems
Right.
like it's usually the vice versa. Like a power lifter is like, I'm going to run a marathon.
Right.
And then it's kind of comical to see them kind of make that transition
Right.
because their muscles are designed, the muscle fibers that they have are designed to lift large amounts of weight over short periods of time. And they're kind of going through this painful process of developing new muscles to now go long distances. So I would say that while there are genetic differences, the basis of nutrition is the same. Meaning that if you take in less calories than you need in a day, then you're going to lose weight. If you take in more than you need a day, you're going to put on fat, which is not always a bad thing.
Right.
So
Yeah.
just a
Mhm.
disclaimer. And then the basics of developing muscle are the same, meaning that it doesn't matter how like what your genetic makeup is. Now there are conditions that I'm not going to go into because I'm not a physician that would make these things more complicated. But what I would say is that the law of thermodynamics does not change, meaning that energy cannot be created or destroyed. It can only be transferred into one form or another. So if you take in calories, your body's either going to burn it or store it.
Right.
And that's true for every person, regardless of their genetic makeup.
Yeah. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the calorie intake, micronutrients, macronutrients, how to balance all of that kind of stuff. And again, it's like we've been saying all along, a lot of it depends on your goals. Like when you get to a certain point where you have certain health goals, like you have to be conscientious of how much you're consuming. So like for me, I like I said, when I was in my late 20s, my primary form of exercise was running. I was running 5 or 6 days a week, every week. And I would do, three days a week, I would do like push-ups, sit-ups, and a little bit of resistance, but that was it.
Yeah.
So, but about 5 years ago, I kind of started transitioning, and a lot of this was because I still love running, but I was doing a lot of the marathon. I trained for like a half marathon, and I was trying to do competitive like speed running to see how fast I could get.
Yeah.
But at the same time, about 5 years ago, I really started getting into weightlifting. I was like, I think that I need more. Again, through research, like I feel like I need more muscle mass. I feel like this is going to benefit me in the long run to do that. So I started kind of slowly moving into weightlifting more and more, and I realized that when I was going on 10, 11, 12-mile runs like on a weekly basis, it was very hard for me to put on any muscle mass at all because I was just depleting myself all the time. So now I've kind of gotten into a situation where I run 3 days a week and I lift 4 days a week. And really, I think and with my runs, I usually cap them at 6 miles. Every now and then, if like we go, like if we're on a trip or something like that and I'm somewhere I've never ran before and I just want to explore, I'll run longer than that just for fun.
Mm-hmm.
But like Saturday, Sunday, Wednesdays, it's 6 miles. I cap it at that. I'm done, and then I lift the other days of the week. But for me, like I've always been like lean, and I'm trying to put on weight. Like I like my goal is not to lose weight. I want to gain like 10 pounds, but I want to gain it in muscle mass.
Mm-hmm.
So like I've tried to adjust my diet to where I'm consuming more protein, and I'm really being like cognizant about how like I'm training in the gym and all of that stuff. And again, all that goes to show you is that like people have different health goals, and so you have to optimize that. So for me, I know it's like increasing my protein intake, lifting more, putting a cap on how much I'm running during the week and everything like that. Whereas other people might have totally different. Like if you're Tom and you're trying to lose 40 pounds, get back to your high school weight or whatever that might be, like you're gonna have different needs. So talk to us about like how do you determine what your caloric intake should be during the day? How do you balance your micros and your macros, and how do you decide between carbs, fat, and protein? Like how do you balance that depending on what goals you're trying to accomplish?
Yeah, so it's different for every person. So there's a base formula that I would recommend. So first off, the first thing that we could talk about is caloric need. So the way that I operate, and I think this is So there's a you've heard of the food pyramid, which I don't agree with.
Yeah, right.
But
It's
but
just
there
garbage.
but there also there's something called, it's a body composition pyramid. And so what the body composition pyramid is it places a rank of importance on the different things that are included in having the appropriate body composition. And then we can kind of translate, we can move from body composition into like athletic performance, which is like we're kind of dealing with two separate things here. As far as body composition goes, so the foundation of that pyramid is calories or caloric intake. So everyone has a base level of calories that they need in a day. So I kind of used a car analogy earlier, meaning that like basically the whole gasoline and everything. Well, so because we don't have like a meter on our bodies that tells us how many calories we're burning in today, if we stick with that car analogy, we're essentially cars that where the gas meter is broken, meaning that we're not really sure
Right.
how many calories we're supposed to take in, or how much we're burning in a day. So what that means is that you kind of there's a thousand different calculators out there. So if you go to, if you kind of have to get a base level understanding of what your calorie burn is a day, and so that's going to take time. So what I would suggest is that you kind of take your factors into your play. Like how active are you? So usually like on those calculators, they'll say, are you not very active? Are you somewhat active? Are you active? Are you very active? And what's that doing is that they're basically setting your calorie goal based on what they think that your neat or your
Right.
basically your net calorie expenditure is. So you want to kind of get a baseline, and this is where a lot of people don't like to track, but really if you're really wanting to get serious about your body composition and your athletic performance, you really need to have an understanding how many calories you're taking in versus how many calories you actually need. And the body is amazing. It does amazing things to where people can live a really long time, um, essentially not really fueling themselves as much as they maybe need to.
Right.
So
Yeah. The human
like,
ability to overcome.
yeah,
It's
yeah. So,
crazy.
so what I would say is that you kind of need to get a base level understanding of what your calorie need is, and then you really need to monitor that over time. And it's really difficult. It's really different for each person because, as you mentioned, so activity level varies based on choice.
Mhm.
Meaning, like if I choose to go on a run, obviously my calorie needs are going to be higher. But also, there's things that we don't always choose. So you've probably met those individuals who have said like, well, I just keep eating as much as I want. I just cannot put on any weight.
Yeah.
Well, so like generally, if you look at those individuals, then there's something that they're doing because of the law of thermodynamics. Like that energy is going
Right.
somewhere, and so a lot of times you can notice that the people who just continuously are eating, but they're not putting on the weight. They often are fidgeters, meaning that they're always moving.
Yeah.
They're not meaning to move, but they're moving.
Right.
So you can
I feel that way.
so
I get it.
you can burn upwards to 800 to 1,000 calories a day just by fidgeting. And
That's
so like
crazy.
if you think about like that from like a perspective of like you're just not really measuring, you're never really going to get enough calories to go in. So the first, I guess the first foundation of like getting your ideal body composition, or performing the way you need to, is to make sure your calories are on point. Real quick, so like you want to find your base. Your base is where if I eat this many calories a day based on the expenditures that the energy expenditures that I might have that day, I'm going to stay even. And you want to have an understanding what that base is. If you're wanting to lose weight, you would decrease that caloric intake by no more than 500 calories. If
Yeah.
you go farther than 500 calories, you're probably going to lose muscle mass, and you really only focus on losing fat.
Yeah.
If you're wanting to gain weight, you probably want to only increase by about 500 calories, because you do want to put on muscle, but you don't want to take on too much fat, which
Right.
would be like problematic. The next tier of the body composition pyramid, and just for as far as like weight of importance, calories is 50% of importance. So like
Yeah.
literally it's half of the battle is understanding how many calories you need to take in versus how many calories you're actually taking
So
out.
I do. Before we move to the next tier, I do
Yeah.
have one follow up question to that. Again, just based on some of the research I've done from some nutritionists, they say that if you're trying to lose weight,
Mhm.
it's better to get into a calorie deficit through exercise than it is through restricting your eating. Is there anything to that? Like, is that what do you think about that claim?
Yeah, so I think that leads into the next part of the
Okay.
thing, which is macronutrients.
Yeah.
And so the reason I think that is important is because do you care if we go into macronutrients?
Oh
So
no,
I'm
no, no,
I,
no,
so
absolutely, yeah,
so
no,
I
'cause
might
it's all connected,
right.
right?
So
So yeah,
because I think that the answer to that question lies into the next important part of the body composition pyramid, which is the macronutrients. So this is where a lot of people just aren't aware. So every single diet that exists, since we've talked about calories. So every diet that exists, at least in America, is essentially what people have done. And this isn't malicious. It's just what they've. I mean, you could argue that it's actually fairly successful to trick someone and going into a caloric deficit. So everyone that's ever gone on a diet, where it be like a paleo diet or keto or Mediterranean, whatever, because the basis of body composition and weight loss and weight gain is based on calories. Whenever you go into a diet, you are now eating in a way that is essentially putting you into a caloric deficit. That's just the way it is.
Mm-hmm.
So the reason that somebody would say that possibly it's better to exercise and lose weight through exercise than it is to just cut calories is because the next part of that is the what your calories should be made up of. And so again, if we're talking about percentage of importance, 50% of what you do from a body composition point is calories. 30% is macronutrients, meaning the type of calories that you're going in. So before we go any farther, like for anyone who's not like a math whiz out there, we're now saying that 80% of your body composition and athletic performance has to do with calories and macros, and that literally only 20%, supplements, hydration, all that other stuff. Like 80% is in calories and macros. So the way that you kind of want to and I don't know if we're going to have enough time to really go into everything. But so
I think we got about 15 more minutes.
So okay.
So,
all right.
Or 15 or no, we got about 20 minutes left.
Okay. Well, I'll be quick. So macronutrients are based up of like protein, carbs, and fats. And so generally, if you're an athlete, so if you consider yourself an athlete, or if you're exercising, essentially, the range of the calculation for how many grams of protein that you should take in is anywhere from 0.8 to 1 grams of protein per pound of body fat, or body weight. Sorry. So that means if we're going to take Tom, Tom is 200 pounds. Tom should be taking in 200 grams of protein, which is a lot of protein.
Yes, it is. It's
much
hard
more.
to do,
much more than, most what Americans would do. Now, if somebody is not being active, they're like, that actually goes down to half.
Right.
So I mean, like you don't have to, there's not as much of a protein need. Next most important macronutrient. So then I'm going to place like priority is on protein. It's the most important macronutrient. Second most important macronutrient is fat. So fat would be, the calculation for fat is a minimum level of fat that you should be taking in is 0.3 times your body weight. That's how many grams of fat as a minimum you should be taking in, because fat is like protects your brain. It protects your organs, protects your skin. So there's a lot of functions that fat have. Carbs is the most, I guess, is third place in far as marking. And so carbs is what it's one of the so there's different energy systems within the body. Carbs is the most readily available form of energy. And so the reason to kind of get to your question as to why that person would say that like it's much easier or preferred to use exercise-based weight loss than it is to food-based weight loss is that, so we've already established that you're supposed to have anywhere from 0.8 to 1 grams of protein per pound of body fat or body weight. So you've got your protein set, you times your body weight by 0.3, so you get your fat set. Well, then now, like, what's left for your overall caloric intake for the day, that's what carbs are. And the reason that is it's important to structure it that way is that because like your carbs are your variable, that means that you have the ability to either choose a very active lifestyle or a very sedentary lifestyle. And you can really kind of dictate what you want based on how many carbs you want. So for example, we'll say that, we'll just use Tom again. So
poor Tom.
Poor Tom. So let's say that, Tom's eating 200 grams of protein. Each gram of protein is 4 calories. So like that's 800 calories worth of protein in a day. So he's got his that like segment of his caloric intake is taken up by protein. He needs to have 0.3% of fat. So I don't, the calculator in the brain's not that strong. So 1 gram of fat is 9 grams of calories, or so 1 gram of fat is 9 calories. So then you take that out. So what you've got left for his total caloric intake for the day is carbs, and that is 100% dictated on how active you are. So if you're very active, you need a little bit more carbs, and if you're less active, then you don't really need a lot of carbs at all. I guess what I would say is that like if you're active, you're able to eat more things.
Right.
You have more food availability because you have the room to fit more carbs into your diet. If you're not active, then you really don't have a lot of room to take in carbs.
Right.
So like I mean, you should almost like carbs should be a very like probably the least available macronutrient in your diet.
Right.
So anyway, that's a really long answer to your question.
No, I think that was really helpful. One of the, as we begin to wrap up today, and give the people that are listening some take home advice for this.
Yeah.
You almost, if you want to optimize your health, you have to have a plan going in. I know that for me, one of the things that has really helped me over the last 5 or 6 years, as I started to take this really seriously, has been like meal prepping before. So I have a smoothie every morning, and I prep them in 2-week intervals and freeze them and just get them out. And I mix with my protein powder and all that stuff in the morning. I meal prep my lunch, and then at the beginning of the week, before we buy our food, we are like my wife and I, we plan out what we're going to have for dinner so we know and can build a healthy diet based on planning. And the other thing too is like I get up and work out every morning, and so I kind of have adjusted my lifestyle to accommodate for the fact that I'm going to get up and have a workout, whether it's a run or lift or whatever, in the morning. But all of that requires planning, right? So you have to think about what you're going to be eating ahead of time. You have to think about how you're going to be exercising ahead of time if you want to optimize this. So what are some advice, or what is some advice that you would give to people who like need to start planning out their diet and need to start planning out their workout routines? Like how does someone go about getting kind of those healthy routines in place?
So I guess what I would say is that everybody has a eating habit, even if they like, a lot of people will say like, I don't want to plan out my meals. Like I just want to like play it by ear. But if you ask those people to track what they eat over a given week, generally they will like, they will see that they actually have habits.
Right. Yeah.
So what I would say is, and this is also key if you can tell if somebody's, how knowledgeable they are, or I guess how intentional they are about like planning their meals, is you ask somebody, what are you having for lunch tomorrow?
Yeah.
And if like they're just like, if they just have no clue on what they're going to eat for lunch tomorrow, then they're not being intentional about their diet. So what I would say is that like, first you need to, once you've kind of developed a base level understanding of nutrition, you need to make a plan for a week. So meal prepping, I think, is like, there's another saying within the nutrition world that is, if you have a problem, generally it's because meal prepping is the answer to that problem.
Yes.
So yeah, the more that you can plan out what you're going to eat days in advance, the better off you're going to be, because ultimately you're not leaving what you eat to chance. If you leave what you're eating to chance, then we've already kind of discussed at the beginning of the show how if you end up eating your food outside of the home, then it's not like eating it's not like eating fast food one time is like you're instantly going to the hospital,
derail your entire life.
But by not being intentional about that meal, you're now going to have to eat a meal that's not going to be optimal for health. So the more that you can plan your meals out, the better you're able to basically dictate what it is that you're putting into your body. So I guess that's probably, a simplest way to say it is you need to be intentional, plan out, and then have a plan for what you're going to be eating for the week.
Yeah. So when would you recommend that somebody seek out a nutrition coach like you? I'm sure it'd be beneficial for everybody. I would say that but for people, I guess that are for people that have put themselves in, like the health hole, where you kind of dug yourself into a hole and you want to climb out. Like, how do you know when you should seek professional help with nutrition and exercise?
So I will like the friend that you mentioned before, who like he basically said he likes beer and cheesecake and he's okay with that. So I think that's a really good point, that there's people like that out there who like right now they're not at a place to where they want to change. So I would say that the first thing, the things that usually are an indicator that you should probably hire a nutrition coach is, one, if you have a time bound goal, meaning that like, this is very popular for like, I want to look really good for this, high school reunion.
Optimal high school weight.
Exactly. Or, I'm going to go to a wedding. So basically if you're wanting to make the change in a healthy way, in a time, it's a time sensitive goal, then you don't really have time to just do the research and figure out how to be, all this nutrition stuff quickly. So I would say that's an opportunity. Even if it's I would say like I don't want to call it like a shallow goal, but it's not like you're not seeking optimal health. You're just looking to like shed some pounds or gain weight. So if it's a time bound goal, that's a perfect opportunity to hire a coach and kind of accelerate the process. The other way, or the other time that I would recommend that people reach out to a coach, is if they're nearing some kind of like almost kind of healthy. So basically, they've got a health concern that they need to correct. They know they need to correct it, and they don't know how to do it. And the consequences of them not correcting that health concern could be dire,
Yeah.
right? So, meaning that they're on a path, meaning that they've been on this path where like they're especially if you're so I'm 40. I don't think you're 40 yet, are
Right.
you?
You know, 36.
Yeah.
36.
So generally around the age of 40, you start experiencing these health concerns that have more dire consequences.
Yeah.
And so you kind of realize that you need to make a change. You can kind of see, if you kind of forecast the next 10 to 20 years in your life, that there's a little bit of uncertainty as to whether or not you're even going to be around.
Right.
Generally that's the pain point is you're to a point where you probably should hire a coach,
Right.
to kind of make a change. Some people just intrinsically want to make a change, and they want to be optimal. They want to they want to they want to be more active. They want to kind of stop the physical decline. That is another reason to hire a coach. So coaching isn't like it doesn't have to be like a lifelong commitment. Generally, like if you just take like a 12-week create a relationship with a coach for 12 weeks, you can kind of learn about fitness and nutrition, and then that could just be enough to kind of propel you for the rest of your life journey. But ultimately, those are the categories, or those are the people who I would generally recommend reach out to a nutrition coach.
So for people that are interested in learning more about this, what are some resources that you recommend? You've already talked about Andrew Huberman, and he has a lot of great content out there. I like Jeff Cavalier, the Athlete X guy. I really like Mike Isratelli. I don't know how to pronounce his last name or whatever. I've learned a lot about weightlifting from Mr. So there are like resources out there. There are a lot of, but the problem is that it can be hard because there is so much, and sometimes you will get conflicting information from different specialists. So what are some like resources that you would recommend to people who are interested in this and want to learn more, and just get this started, get started thinking about it?
Well, so it depends on what kind of what type of media you take in. It's really difficult to prescribe like one path for someone to kind of. So one is that just there should be increased curiosity just about nutrition in general.
Yeah.
And then this is kind of comes from the academia world, but you should cross-reference the information that you're getting. So one, you want to find a source that would be determined strong. So somebody that I'm a big fan of his name is Mark Sisson. So he authored the book Primal Blueprint. Not saying that you necessarily need to do the Primal Blueprint, but what I am saying is that like the great thing about that book is at the beginning of the book he lays out a really strong foundation for nutrition science. So this is a calorie, this is a carb, this is a fat, this is protein. I would read a book like Primal Blueprint, not necessarily because you need to follow that particular diet plan, but because he lays out, the I guess science-backed, notion of what nutrition is. Once you start learning more about nutrition, I would recommend that you start trying to find, there's people, whether it be Facebook or Instagram, Dr. Alan Bacon is somebody who
what a great last name.
Right. Well, he's somebody who he was a dentist, and then he became really passionate about nutrition science, became a nutritionist. So he's someone. So find somebody like him, and then what I would say is that once you find somebody that you can, quote unquote trust, then you basically, whenever they vouch for somebody, follow them as well. So I would just say, there's like we live in a social media society. I would say, find influencers that you can trust. There are some like warning signs. So basically, the reason the reason that it's really important to have a very firm understanding of nutrition is that there's a lot of people. Again, how we kind of talked about how like ignorance breeds manipulation. And so like if you're not there's a lot of influencers out there who it's not that they don't know their stuff, but they know that you don't know the stuff.
Right.
And so whenever they're giving you information, they're giving you information in order to sell something. So anyway, I guess that, I guess my answer would be to read. Renaissance Periodization is so RP Science. That's another company that I highly recommend. So my certification is through NASM, which is like the National Academy of Sports Medicine. But I would say that when I teach nutrition, A lot of that is based on my certification, but I would say that, I would almost, if more of my knowledge comes from Renaissance Periodization, which is just another company that they do a lot of great work. So those are some outlets I guess I would recommend.
Well, as we close the show today, and I want to end on a positive note here,
Yeah.
because we've talked a lot about how Americans are just really unhealthy and need to get in shape. What are some words of encouragement that you would give to people that are just beginning this journey? Like, what motivator or encouragement would you give to those people?
Well, I mean, one, I would say anyone can do it. I think that, I think that a lot of people have an idea that like eating healthy means that you don't eat tasty food. I would completely disagree with
Yeah.
that. I would consider myself like a foodie.
Yeah.
And so I think it's possible to both eat a diet that is in the interest of your optimal health, and also eat really great food.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that you'll benefit or that you'll experience whenever you start eating a more healthy diet is you're exploring you'll find that you'll have more life. And so I think that anytime you can, kind of exponentially increase the happiness of your life, I think it's a good thing.
Right.
And I guess I would just say that it's possible. So for everybody who hears this, anybody who is not at their ideal, body image or body composition, it's possible you have the ability to dictate your health by the way that you eat. So like if you were to start right now, or tomorrow or whenever, but if you start like making your health a priority from a nutrition standpoint, then it is 100% science backed. You're going to experience an improvement in life. So it's not like it's only the guy who is really good at sports who's able to do this.
Right.
Literally everybody who, like, if they start walking this path, they have the potential to experience more life and vitality. So
Oh, I love it. Well, for everyone that listened to the show today, I hope that this is a good motivator for you to go out there and take charge of your health. Matt, I mean, do you like take emails or whatever from people randomly? Do you want to plug anything for yourself?
yeah, I
or-
mean, so like that's the problem with my business is I don't get very good at marketing. But yeah, but like so I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram. So I'm both, Matt Barber is my handle on both. My email address is matthew.thomas.barber@gmail.com. Which is like, I think I made it in high school, and I was just like, I'll just put everything in there. But yeah, but I'm on social medias. I'm, obviously friends with Alex, so you can probably cross reference me there. But yeah, I'm happy to talk to anybody about nutrition. And then I would say, as far as nutrition coaching, because I kind of do it as a side gig, I'm generally cheaper than all the other coaches out there.
Yeah, which is always a good thing.
Yeah,
So
right.
I'll put links to all that in the show notes for anyone that's interested in that. But Matt, man, thanks for coming and talking today.
Hey, it's always a pleasure.
I got the awkward ending here. Let's see. That was great though, man. If you want to